Good evening, everyone. We'll get started in about 1 minute. So hang on and we'll get this show on the road in about one more minute. Well, hello, everyone. It's great to be with all of you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend with me and Sherry and James answering questions and to learn a little more about beekeeping. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I always appreciate your time. And I have people come up to me all the time when I'm traveling or speaking somewhere. Like, oh, we watch your monthly buzz webinar and we just love it. And I'm always a little blown away that so many people, spend an hour or two watching this. So thank you. I'm honored, and I appreciate your time. I appreciate you spending it with me, and I have a blast doing these. And it's always great to get to visit with all of you in person as I travel and speak other places and meet some of you after sort of meeting you doing these webinars. So thank you. Great to be with you. We've got a fun evening planned. We're going to be doing something a little bit different because it's December and there's not that much going on in the bee world because our bees are all they're all hibernating, clustered for the winter. I'm going to be talking a little bit about what you need to be doing in your bees right now. So we'll take the first 20 minutes or so and talk about, hey, here's what you need to be doing in your bees right now. But after that, I will be actually talking about a year in my life. And that's a little bit different than I usually talk about because usually I talk about just strictly beekeeping. Um, that's what we usually focus on with our education is practical beekeeping. But because we've got spare time and not a lot of topics in December to go over, I'm going to be talking about what it looks like to in the year in the life of a commercial beekeeper, in the businesses that I'm honored to run. And it's going to be a wild ride. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be super entertaining. And I think it'll be very educational because you're going to get a real insider look that many people will never experience. And so I think you're going to hopefully find it enjoyable. I'm actually live streaming tonight from the American Honey Producers Association conference. So it's one of the two of the national beekeeping organizations. One is the American Beekeeping Federation, and it has its annual conference in January. And then the American Honey Producers Association, it has its conference in December of every year. So I'm live streaming from that tonight. So lighting's a little bit weird in my hotel room, streaming from that. Great conference. On the board of directors for both of those organizations. And I want to share a couple of really kind of breaking news things that have been a major topic of discussion at the conference. But before I do that, Sherry, I'd love to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about what we're focusing on in our education this month for TBS. So, Jerry, take it away.
All right. Well, here I am. It's a short month for us because we have Christmas coming. So we're gonna all of us take a little reprieve on week 4 to be with our families. So you'll see that depicted here. So those of you new to our system, we are in the know. And if you'll go to our website under TBS monthly articles and put your email address in there, we're going to send you these articles that I'm going to mention to you. About once a week, you'll get two in an email. And then at the end of the month, we send you kind of a this is everything we talked about email. So get on that train if you're not on it already. So week one, you'll see how to keep bees alive during winter. We all need to know what that is, right? How to do that, right? Beehive management and the caste system of honeybees. And I got to say that this is a nice way of saying bee biology, but it's a twist. It's really super cool. I really want y'all to read this. It's a good wintertime read and study, to be honest. Maintaining beekeeping equipment, essential winter chores for beekeepers. We do that. Matter of fact, James was painting boxes today, were you not? And yesterday he slid out of the camera. He didn't want you to see, but he's been painting boxes. So that's what we do. We got winter chores. That's right. Colony collapse disorder, understanding the crisis and where bees stand today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that in here in just a minute. Week 3, planting now for honeybee pollination and forage later. The best plants that and honeybee care. I'll tell you, that's a pretty cool article too, because we want to plant for the future, right? And that has some really good information in it. And infused honey, a creative way to boost your beekeeping for profit. And we want that, don't we? And then week 4, Merry Christmas, like I said. All right, Blake, if you'll switch to that next slide. There we go. So I'm going to talk to you about colony collapse disorder, and I'm going to confess something to y'all that when we first started beekeeping, this was all I knew about bees, was that there was colony, at some point, there was this word, colony collapse disorder, and all the bees are dying. Well, that's really kind of only, I think, the headline of what was really going on at the time. Now, this emerged in 2006. And it certainly was I'm going to use the word catastrophe for the bee world. Commercial beekeepers really and truly were the first of the industry to start saying, whoa, what's going on? I did some statistics, wrote down some things that I wanted to share with you. In 2006, 23% of colonies were lost. Okay. I just want to poke in there real quick. Remember that varroa mites have been around since 1986. Is that right? So this was a full 10 years later. 2008, are you ready? By 2008, so 6 is when they just started talking about colony collapse disorder. By 2008, 60% of the hives were lost to what they considered CCD reasons. Okay. That's a lot. It was a big deal. It's not that long ago, right? So what CCD is, colony collapse disorder, is worker bees suddenly disappear. The queen is still there. The brood that the workers were working on is still there. The food stores are still there, but the workers are gone. There's no dead bees laying around. It's just stagnant. There's not a workforce to take care of what is left. And of course, the queen, she depends on the workers to feed her. So it's pretty much colony collapse, right? That's where the term came from. So, and few dead bees, I think I said that. And that's what was so strange. It was like, okay, so they didn't abscond. We still see the queen. They didn't swarm. Obviously, the queen was still there and all the resources are there. So what could have happened? Well, as time went on, it became very clear that it was environmental changes that really encompass the whole thing. And I listed them out here: pesticides and herbicides and all the ides, right? I didn't go through the whole thing, but pesticides covers all of those. Parasites and pathogens. Do you know what that is? Varroa. That's Varroa and its problems. Poor nutrition, which kind of in a way ties to Varroa problems, because all of it kind of leads to one, leads to the other, right? Stress from environmental factors. So I don't know if anybody has noticed, but we're growing. There's a lot more concrete. There's a lot more of us, a lot more businesses, a lot more homes. All of these things is kind of stressing our animals, insects and animals alike, right? And so all of these together are what CCD is attributed to, which is kind of an interesting, it's no one certain thing, but it is one certain symptom, and it's those worker bees being gone. Before I get to the takeaway, jump ahead to 2023. These are recent figures. 2023, 107,630 colonies were reported with CCD symptoms, which was 25% of those in 2023. That's an increase from the previous quarter, the same quarter for the previous year, but I wanted to report this year so y'all would feel better about it. I think it makes me feel better anyway. 2024, January through March, 15% loss attributed to CCD. April through June, which we just did, 11%. So as you see here, I'm gonna go down to the takeaway. It is still a problem, but it's not anything to what it once was. Why is that? I think that it has everything to do with awareness. I should have put that word in there, but it is awareness. It's the public's awareness. Some beekeepers making their views very well known that we need to be taking care of our bees and better nutrition and varroa control. All of these things matter. Bee-friendly practices promoting responsible beekeeping ensure that our honeybees are going to be well and continue to sustain us. But it's really an interesting article. I want you to pull it up when it gets posted on the website. And again, I think that's week 2. And enjoy the read and do your own research as well. So anyway, that's all I've got. Merry Christmas.
Awesome. Thank you, Sherry. Fantastic info as always. And let's jump in. If you still need bees, get those orders in really quickly. We're holding down pricing until the end of the year. So if you haven't ordered bees for 2025, highly encourage you to get those orders in. Okay, I want to share just a couple of slides from the conference I was attending. A lot of great information, but there's a lot of talk. There were several sessions dedicated to the Tropilaelaps mite, or the Tropi Mite, or the T mite, if you want to go as short as possible. So you're all familiar with varroa mites, and they are the biggest problem that faces our industry as a whole. This particular conference I'm at is 98% commercial beekeepers, so it's one of the only conferences in the United States that is pretty much just commercial beekeepers. So you'll usually find them talking about, things that are going to have major impacts on the industry. And the Tropilaelaps mite has been a pretty big topic of conversation for the past 2 or 3 years now. And it's now a major topic of discussion. So we don't have the Tropilaelaps mite in the United States yet, but most people agree that it's not a matter of if we get it, but a matter of when we get the Tropilaelaps mite. So when varroa mites came in the late 80s, early 90s, we were completely unprepared as an industry. It devastated the industry, still has a huge impact on us today, even all these years later. We want to be better prepared for the Tropilaelaps mite. Now, we'll have entire presentations on this for all of you in the years to come. We'll keep you up to date. We'll talk about how to manage it when it gets here. We'll talk about how to manage it preemptively. So we'll keep you up to date, updated through TBS. But it's a lot worse than the varroa mite. So the Tropilaelaps mite reproduces far faster. It's much harder to identify. It's much harder to see. It's much harder to test for, and most mite treatments don't affect it. So it's way, way, way worse than the varroa mite. That's what we've been hearing for the last couple of years. So not great news. But I will say some of the information that I've learned partly through this conference, a lot through Marcus Hill, who spoke at our one of these webinars a few months back. He's one of our operations managers here at our company. I feel a little better about the Tropilaelaps mite. Here's the current treatments that have mixed success. So things like HopGuard and Amitraz. Amitraz is the same thing as Apivar. So the plastic Apivar strips. um, does has no effect on the Tropilaelaps mite. Um, the one treatment that does seem to work is formic acid. The problem is that it isn't 100% effective, and Tropilaelaps mites reproduce extremely quickly. So even if there's only, a dozen left in the brood after a formic acid treatment, they can reproduce really, really fast and reinfect the hive really quickly. So a treatment as of yet is not going to be the only solution to control the Tropi mite. I think I saw someone ask in the chat where the Tropi mite is or how close it is. So it's not in North or South America currently. Where we think it will enter in, though, it's in Asia, it's in parts of Europe, and where we think it will enter in is either through packaged bees through Canada. So Canada imports a lot of packaged bees from all over the world, unfortunately. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. But so we think it could enter there, or much like the varroa mite got into the United States, swarms of bees will get on ships that are transporting containers of goods from other countries, and those swarms will live on the ship until the ship docks in the United States. The swarm leaves the ship, and you've got an infestation. So that's most likely how it will enter. And so, really, no matter where in the world it is, it can enter at any time, unfortunately, through those means. So I told you there was some good news. So the good news is that here's what seems to be very effective. Brood breaks are very effective. Now, the good news is that the Tropi mite cannot survive for long, couple days at the very most, on adult bees. So it doesn't feed on adult bees like the varroa mite does. So the varroa mite can be phoretic. So it can latch on to the adult bee, suck the hemolymph or from an adult bee and live for days and days or months even by feeding on the adult bees. The Tropi mite doesn't feed on adult bees, it just feeds on the developing brood. So if you have no brood in the hive, you have no Tropi mites. So if you're in the northern half of the United States, or even in areas throughout the winter where bees go completely broodless, that will eliminate the Tropi mite. Now, they'll reinfest the country every single year once it warms up and all the bees start brooding up, and they'll make their way through the country again, but it'll slow them down a lot having to repopulate after brood breaks. So that's good news. Now, if you're in Florida, or in an area that the bees never go broodless, that's a big problem. They can also kill your hive much, much faster than Varroa. So if you get an infestation in the spring, they can kill your hive quickly, even if they were previously not infecting your hive. So, however, the good news is they can't survive on adult bees. And with a combination of brood breaks and formic acid treatments, I think we at least have the beginnings of a path to control the Tropi mite. There might even be some opportunities for eradication programs between brood breaks and formic acid. We might have huge portions of the country that we can just eradicate them from. So there is some good news out there, and the really good news is it's not even here yet, and we're already developing control methods, response plans. We're doing training, which puts us way ahead of the last time we had this issue and when varroa mites came in. So some good news overall. If you want to read some really good papers, you can scan this QR code. This was a paper by Auburn University that talks in a little more detail about the Tropi mite and some mitigation efforts that were experimented on. There's a lot of researchers from the US going over to Thailand in particular right now. Thailand has a lot of Tropi mites. And so there's a lot of US researchers and bee inspectors and beekeepers even heading over to Thailand to study this mite proactively. So that's all really, really good news. And hopefully by the time it gets here, we'll have strong action plans in place. So anyway, there's your quick little breaking news. Again, this unfortunately won't be the last time you hear me and others talk about the Tropi Mite, but we're way ahead of where we were 30 years ago when varroa mites came in. So, all right, let's talk about monthly tips. And before we get into the main presentation tonight, it's going to be pretty quick because, again, it's December. Winter's here, sort of. Some areas are really warm still, some areas are really cold. We're slipping into the normal pattern of we've got some cool days, we've got warmer days, no real measurable pollen or nectar coming in. Hive growth has ended. Most bees are shut down for the winter. So we're kind of in it for the long haul now. And in January in the far south, bees will start brooding up again. And in the north, it's going to be a long, long time before that happens. Still pretty dry out there. I mean, here's the U.S. drought map from a few days ago here on the left. Here's a drought map from a year ago. A lot more widespread drought this year, but yeah, still pretty dry out there. December hives, these are some hives I was looking at. Some hives have a little bitty patch of brood. A lot of hives have no brood at all. So that's very normal. I wouldn't expect to see brood, eggs, larvae, etc. in most hives at this point. Quick reminder, if you're in the southern half of the United States, you're going to maintain 30 to 40 pounds of stores in the second box with 3 to 4 frames of honey in the bottom box. That's for a hive of bees that is one deep box or more. Northern half of the United States, 50 to 60 pounds in the second box, 3 to 4 frames of honey in the bottom box. Most liquid feeds aren't going to be very effective when it's this cold, so you're going to need to switch to a fondant, one of Stan's soft sugar bricks, some sort of a feed that can sit right on top of the cluster. And of course, I got ahead of myself. There's a slide on winter feed options. The Stan's soft sugar bricks is obviously my favorite. But whatever feed source, if your bees still need it, it needs to go right on top of the cluster so the bees can access it even when it's so cold. Winter pollen substitute, not necessary. Once the bees have shut down and there's no real significant amounts of brood, you don't need to be feeding pollen substitute. That being the case, certainly isn't going to hurt anything. I still know people that are still feeding pollen patties, so it's not going to hurt anything. Insurance reducers can go on. So if you haven't put your insurance reducers on your hives yet, now's the time to put them on. You can cover your screen bottom boards if you have them, or at least block the sides of your hive stand so cold wind can't blow up under the hive. But now's the time of year to get all that on. You will have dead outs this time of year. That's very normal. The key thing to remember is that comb is golden and you want to preserve it. So get that comb stored, pick up dead hives, don't let them sit out in the field, and don't give up. That comb, that honey, that pollen that's left over from that dead hive is going to rocket your hive, your new hive next year ahead. So whether you split from your hives that are still alive, you catch a swarm, you buy a nook, you buy a package, whatever you install in that box is going to do so much better next year with all that comb. So again, quick reminder, it's normal in December to see no brood, no eggs, no pollen stores, greatly slowed pollen patty and syrup consumption. You'll see swings in visible population based on the temperature. A sunny 65-degree day, you might look like you have 2 boxes full of bees. A 30-degree day, you probably look like there's almost no bees in there. So you'll see these swings as the bees contract and cluster more tightly versus expand. Quick reminder on when it's okay to look at your bees. If it's above 32 degrees, you can do a less than a minute. Try to look less than a minute. I don't pull frames out of hives if it's 32 degrees. I'm sorry, if it's 32 degrees or below. I need to rephrase that. If it's 32 degrees or below, I spend less than a minute. I don't pull out frames, but it's still perfectly fine to crack your boxes apart, lift up, feel the weight, take a quick look under the lid, even if it's below 32 degrees. If it's sunny and above 40 degrees, you can spend a couple of minutes. You can pull out a frame and look at it, but I wouldn't spend more than a minute or two. If it's 50 degrees and sunny or 50 degrees and sunny, I'll pull out several frames, do a full inspection. I try to do inspections during the heat of the day, several hours before dark. That gives my hive times to reform their cluster before it gets cold again. And remember, even if it's cold, it's better to look at your bees than not. Starvation will kill your bees a whole lot faster than a breath of cold air when you crack the boxes apart. Okay, so let's jump into the main event. I'm pretty excited about this presentation and showing it to you guys. Uh, you are I don't talk a lot about how I got started in beekeeping on this platform. I don't talk a lot about all the other companies we have and what happens the rest of the year in all the companies you see here that I get to participate in every day. But it's a fun presentation, and I'm going to just take you through a little bit about my story and then what my life is like and what a year looks like. So buckle up; it's going to be fun and hopefully entertaining. So a long time ago, I got started in beekeeping through a youth scholarship program. I was 12 years old. And I had really, I knew nothing about bees. I mean, I knew they stung and I knew they produced honey, and that's about it. I didn't know anything else. But I had convinced my parents that I was going to be a chicken farmer. We lived out in the country. I had always loved anything outdoors, anything agriculture. And so I had like 80 chickens as a 11-year-old. And I had convinced my parents that, hey, I'm going to be like this commercial chicken farmer. And I think they believed me and they're like, okay, we've got to get this kid on anything else, not chicken farming, because we don't want a chicken farm in our backyard. So they signed me up for, sports and a co-op and all these different things to see if they could divert my attention. And one of the things they signed me up for was a youth scholarship program trying to get kids involved in beekeeping. And so I they signed me up for it and I won it. So I won along with five other kids a free beehive, a free class, trying to, from a local bee club that was trying to get kids started because only about 3% of beekeepers are under 40 years old. So I won that as a kid and fell in love with beekeeping. Took the first class, absolutely fell in love. And so this picture on the right was my very first time to look in my own beehive. Not a great picture. Picture on the left was a few years later. I actually did a bee beard, and but this was, back in. I'm 34 now, so this was 22 years ago that I was getting started in beekeeping, and I'm going to skip that. And so I really just built a business through high school, and I fell in love with it. I split my bees, I caught swarms, I grew my operation, and by the time I graduated high school, I was running a small commercial beekeeping operation with several hundred beehives and selling the honey I produced to local stores in the Dallas Fort Worth area. And so I just moved into full-time beekeeping right out of high school and never really looked back. So really spent my 20s um, really focused well up into my mid 20s, I guess, focusing on commercial beekeeping, raising bees, and had built a commercial operation with several thousand beehives in it, and then really started diversifying after that into a number of other beekeeping businesses because it was fun. and beekeeping is very seasonal, and I wanted to diversify and have a smoother cash flow situation. And I love starting new businesses. I've always enjoyed entrepreneurship as much as beekeeping. So what you're going to see from here on out is a kind of a year in the life as it stands today. So what does it look like these days, now that it's 22 years later and we have all these businesses? So let's start with Desert Creek Beekeeping. So we have a number of different companies under the Desert Creek brand. Um, I started my very first company that I ever started was Desert Creek Honey. And I named it that because I grew up on Desert Creek. So it was a creek I grew up on. And I picked the name because when I was probably 14, there was a awesome sale on business cards at the local printing company. And I just had to take advantage of that business card sale. And I said, I've got to have a name because I got to put a name on a business card. And I said, okay, well, I grew up on Desert Creek, so guess I'll pick Desert Creek. So pulled the name out of the hat, put it on the business card, and kind of stuck. So Desert Creek was the name, and that was the very first company, Desert Creek Honey, that was just focused on commercial beekeeping. So our year starts if we look at like, hey, where are our bees right now? December and January, start of the new year. They're currently, for the most part, in Filer, Idaho, indoors. So this is some shots of our bees, and indoors in these climate controlled sheds. So these sheds are pretty amazing. They keep the temperature exactly at about 40 to 43 degrees. And it's the perfect hibernation conditions for our bees. So we monitor the CO2 levels, the oxygen levels, the temperature, the humidity, all that's monitored and configured that in a way that is perfect for bees to hibernate. And what we find is that number one, the bees consume a lot less honey. So when I used to overwinter my bees in Texas for many years, every warm day the bees would come out, they'd fly, they'd forage, but there's nothing for them to eat. And so what they're really doing on those warm days is they're wearing themselves out. They're burning through their honey stores, they're wearing out their wings for no purpose, really. So when we have those hot days, in the South in the winter and the bees start flying, that's actually not really a good thing. A colder winter in the South is better because the bees shut down. They aren't wasting their reserves going out and flying. So, um, so for years, I overwintered in Texas, and I would usually lose about 4 frames worth of bees. So if my hive went into winter with 10 frames of bees, I'd come out with about 6 frames of bees, because they would just lose bees all winter long. When they're in these sheds, they go in early October and they don't come out until mid to late January. So then they're in there almost 4 months, but they don't really lose much population. The strength you send them in is roughly the strength that they come out. And they only eat about 12 pounds of food, which is crazy, right? I mean, I was just talking earlier about, hey, if you're in the South, you need 30 to 40 pounds of stores. And if you're in the South, and then North, you need 50 to 60 pounds of stores. Well, in these sheds, they only eat about 12 to 15 pounds for a double deep, 2 deep boxes full of bees. So they don't eat nearly as much food. So it's way more efficient. So you can see there's semi trucks. We unload the trucks, truckloads of bees in the sheds, and they kind of get parked in these little lanes, and they just camp out there until mid to late January. And in mid to late January, they get loaded back up on trucks and they're sent to another one of our companies, which is Desert Creek Pollination. Desert Creek Pollination, we're actually one of the largest pollination logistics providers in the US, if not the largest. So what we do is we put all of our own bees in almond pollination, and we put tons of other people's bees in almond pollination. So people will send us their bees, and we'll unload their trucks, spread them out in the almond orchards for pollination for about 6 weeks, and then load them back up and send them back to the beekeeper. So some beekeepers never go out there at all. So we provide all the services where they just send us their bees. We charge a fee and then send their bees back to them when they're done pollinating. So we spread out tens of thousands of beehives in the Central Valley for almond pollination. Um, so this is one of our holding yards. We also overwinter a lot of people's bees in the Central Valley of California for them. So not everybody overwinters bees in these sheds like we do indoors. A lot of them will send us their bees and we'll put them in the foothills of California along the mountains. And most days in the winter in California are in the 40s. and it doesn't get crazy cold. It doesn't get down to 0 degrees or in the teens. It stays a little bit warmer, but not warm enough so the bees can fly. So it's a pretty good area to overwinter bees. So you can put, I think this yard has 10,000 hives in it. You can put 10,000 hives in a yard because they're not going to come out and fly. It's very rare that they're going to fly during the winter because it's too cold. So they're just stored there. And then once the bees start flying, we're taking them out, spreading them out, and putting them into the almond orchards. This was crazy. This is one of our super suits, by the way. Shameless plug. We didn't get stung at all, but this was a couple years ago. We were working the bees, and this was in a huge holding yard. And the bees hadn't been flying hardly at all winter long. And we were getting ready to move them out of this holding yard, but we were checking them. We were pulling the dead hives off of the pallets of bees because we didn't want to move dead hives around. We just wanted to move the good living hives. And so we were going through all these beehives, and it happened to be an unusually warm day, and the bees were flying for the first time in a couple of months. And they were not happy. They had not got a chance to come out and go to the restroom in a month. And so they were not happy. So you can see in that picture, they were all over us. I mean, we were having to wipe our faces to see. That's how upset these bees were. Funny thing is, a couple days later, they were perfectly gentle. They just weren't happy because they hadn't come out and flown in so long. But they couldn't sting us because we were, wearing our super suits, and so we weren't getting stung. But these bees did something I had never seen before. Instead of stinging us, I think they're evolving to bypass our super suits. So they would hang on to our bee veil, and they would stick the stinger through the bee veil. Now they couldn't reach us, but you would see all these little stingers pointed at you. And then these little droplets of venom would come out of their stinger. And then they would fan their wings and they would blow that venom into our faces. And so we were sneezing. Our lips were burning. If you licked your lips, you could taste the venom. Our eyes were running. It was like this mild reaction to having this bee venom blown into your face all day long. It was the craziest thing. And after a day, they calmed down and they were perfectly gentle, and we probably could have not worn a veil and been fine. But it was the smartest thing I'd seen. I mean, they were figuring out how to bother us, even though they couldn't sting us. So anyway, about a week before those almond trees start to bloom, we're picking up the bees and we're moving them usually at night. So the bees aren't flying at night into the almond orchards, spreading them evenly throughout the almond orchards. The almond pollination event is the largest pollination event in the world. It takes essentially every commercially managed beehive in the United States to pollinate the almond crops. That's how many bees they need to pollinate the almonds. About 90% of the world's almonds are produced in the Central Valley of California. With bees, almonds can produce, 2 to 3,000 pounds per acre. Without bees, they produce 2 to 300 pounds per acre. So almond growers have got to have bees to pollinate. And so, and because it takes all the bees in the U.S., and some years there's not enough bees, they pay a premium to get us to bring our bees there. So it's very profitable. And it's essential. It's essential for the beekeepers. It's essential for the almond growers. It's half of the revenue for a lot of commercial beekeepers at the almond pollination event. This is one of our crews. We've got a great crew out there. So thankful for them. Most of our crew gets out there in early January, and they're out there through early April, spreading out these tens of thousands of beehives and making sure they're properly taken care of. I love this video. You don't need the audio there. The video, this is nectar. We're shaking nectar out of a frame. Sometimes you can get a lot of nectar produced from the almond trees. About 1 in every 3 years, the bees actually produce a little bit of a surplus. They might make 20 pounds of extra honey, but most years they just make enough nectar to sustain their own hive. And then the pollen is extremely, oops. the pollen is extremely nutritious. It's one of the most nutritious pollens in existence for the honeybees. So it's warm. There's a great nectar flow, a great pollen flow. The bees grow insanely fast. So they'll grow faster here than anywhere else in the country because you know it's warm and they've got a great flow where everything else in the country isn't blooming yet. So it gives the bees a huge head start when it comes to growth. This is our crew. Let me turn the audio off there. This was the very last night. So you can see we've got the trucks of bees rolling out of this holding yard on a really good night, with where it's not muddy and raining. We can spread out a few, 4 or 5 thousand beehives per night. If it's pouring down rain and muddy, we may not spread any every night. So we pray for dry weather when we're trying to get bees into the almond orchards. This is a shot. This was at the end of the season, so this is in March. The holding yards are growing grass, and there's some flowers blooming, but it's just a beautiful picture. So, got to show it. Very, very beautiful. When and the foothills on either side of the valley of California. These are the maps we sometimes get. The grower will show us where they want bees in the almond orchard. And so you've got this map with some X's on it. And so you're looking at your smartphone at the GPS satellite image of an orchard. And then you're looking at this map where the almond growers are telling us where they want bees. And it's a lot of long nights trying to figure out where to put bees in these orchards. When the almond orchards are blooming, absolutely beautiful. Just these acres and acres of pure white. Smell is incredible. You can smell the almond trees blooming. It's absolutely stunning. This is when petal fall begins. That's not snow on the ground. Those are actually petals. So, and this particular grower had just mowed his rows. So it's just a beautiful shot of this green grass, freshly mowed rows, and then the petals starting to fall. Here's a shot of part of the valley when the almond orchards are in bloom. Just again, just a sea of white as far as you can see. The growers will actually plant different varieties on different rows. And so you'll have rows that bloom at different times. So you can kind of see that in this row. Some rows are in full bloom, others are winding down. And that's so that the bees can pollinate more effectively. So if everything bloomed at once, we wouldn't have enough bees to pollinate. But when one row blooms and the other doesn't, you can pollinate more effectively and efficiently. Couple years ago, we actually had some really bizarre extreme weather in California. We had snow. So these trees were actually in bloom. And in Northern California, it snowed. Super unusual. Very, very, very rare. And we actually had snow and a ton of rain that year. There were only 5 days in a lot of areas, 5 days out of 6 weeks, that the bees were actually able to forage. That's how wet and rainy and cold it was. And amazingly, the bees brought in so much pollen and nectar in those 5 days that they looked fantastic. And it was actually a decent almond crop. The bees are so efficient and so effective at pollinating that they did incredible work in just 5 days. This was that particular year. This is one of the orchards where we had a
Want some
flood.
dinner?
And that is a fish in this almond orchard. There are not supposed to be fish in almond orchards, uh, nor is there supposed to be water. You can see our hives in the background there. We had this grower call us, and it had been raining a lot, but it had been a couple days since it had rained. And you can see it's a bright sunny day, and our grower called and said, "Hey, you need to come move your bees. It's flooding." And we were like, "Okay, we'll come move them tonight." And he said, "No, you need to come like right now. In an hour, this orchard is going to be under 6 feet of water. And if you don't get your bees out right now, they're all going to flood." I think we had like, over 1,000 hives in that orchard. And what had happened is it had rained up in the mountains of California, and it was a hot rain, a warm rain, and it melted a lot of the snow up in the mountains. And that had caused water to flood out of the mountains, and it was flooding this orchard. So in the middle of the day, we rushed to the orchard, picked up the hives, moved them to higher ground before they flooded. And a few hours later, yeah, that orchard was completely underwater, and we would have lost everything. So crazy days. These are the trucks and forklifts we use to move the bees while we're in California. So these are flatbed trucks, and we can put, about 120 hives per truck. And then we have these forklifts, of course, that we use to spread the bees. This is never fun. We actually had a forklift that, it was super muddy and slid off the trailer into a ditch and flipped. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. But these are the kind of calls you get at 2 a.m. Oops, 2 a.m. Like, hey, we need another forklift. So exciting. It's always exciting out there. Pretty exhausting. When it's not raining, we're working 24-hour days sometimes. Sometimes we work in a couple different shifts. And then you take a quick nap when you can get it on those days. I'm going to skip through this, but if we do everything right, the bees look phenomenal when they come home. They're, they're packed full, tons of bees, super healthy because that almond pollen is just so nutritious. This was a new. I found this hilarious. So I was out in the orchard, and I had a new beekeeper with me. This was his first season, and he was a little timid with the smoker, so he was kind of just pointing the smoker at the hives and giving it a few puffs, but not really getting the smoke into the hive. When you're really trying to smoke a beehive, you should essentially stick the nozzle of the beehive right into the entrance and give it a few puffs of smoke to really get that smoke inside the hive to calm the bees down. And he was just more puffing it around the outside. And I was getting stung up like crazy. I mean, a lot of times we don't wear bee veils. So the guy sitting on the forklift often doesn't wear a bee veil because it restricts your visibility a lot. So I didn't have a bee veil on, and I was just getting stung. Every second I was getting another sting on my neck or my face. And so I stopped, and I told this new guy, I said, okay, I want you to smoke these hives so well that I can't even see the pallet of bees. And I was kidding. I was saying, give them a lot more smoke. And I turn around, and he took it very literally. And you can't see it, but there is a whole pallet of bees inside that smoke. He had he had literally smoked all the bees so much that I couldn't even see the bees. So I said, okay, great job. You're smoking them well. I'm not getting stung now, but back off a little bit on the smoke. So um, this was a final truckload of bees. I don't know. I don't know how many hundreds of semi-loads of bees we shipped in and out of almonds last year, but it was hundreds of semi-loads of bees in and out of almonds. And then this was the last truck on the last night to go out. And it's always a bit of a celebratory truckload of bees to go out when the last one heads back home for the season. But our bees come back to North Texas, which is where I live, when almonds are done in mid-March. All the bees come back home to Texas, where we are making splits. So we split our beehives to make more. And of course, it rains. It rains like crazy when we're trying to get our bees back to Texas. And this was a semi. You can see all that gravel to the left of that truck, and the truck decided to drive way far to the right, fell off the side of the road. And you can see we've got one of our trucks hooked to it, and you can see that chain running between the back of that semi truck and the back of our truck. And that's the only thing keeping that truck from flipping right over. Now, the tricky thing is when you have this happen, is if you remove the straps from that semi, those you can see the straps that are holding those bees on, then all the beehives will fall off. So you can't just remove the straps and unload the truck with a forklift. You've got to actually get a wrecker out there and drag the truck back in place. So it's always exciting getting so many semi-loads of bees back home when it's wet. But we do our splits. So we're taking our strong hives, dividing them up into multiple hives. And the brood usually looks phenomenal. I mean, there's a great brood, great pollen from the almonds, and then there's a great pollen flow in Texas. And so we're able to keep growing bees for the honey crop. Um, when we have to do splits, and when we're making all these splits, we have to do it no matter what the weather's like, because we have all these queens that we're raising, and they've got to go into the hives at just the right time. And so there's often a day or two where it's really cold and it's 40 degrees outside, and we have to make splits anyway because we're on a tight schedule. And what happens is the bees are fine. They just cluster, but they'll, even at 40 degrees or even at 30 degrees, they'll fly out of the hive when they're disturbed. But they do one of two things. When they fly out of the hive, they go, okay, whoa, this is way too cold, and they fly right back in. Or they cluster on the nearest heat source that they can find to stay warm. And on chilly days, that's often us. We're the closest heat source. And so you'll end up with these pockets of bees all over your bee suit. And it's like these little hand warmers. They're generating heat. It's the coolest thing. And they're not stinging us, they're not mad. And so we have these little pockets of warm bees all over us. And then when we have a hive that doesn't have enough bees, we just take a scoop of bees off of our bee suit and dump it in a hive that needs more bees. So it's dual purpose. It's these little heaters, and it's extra bees whenever we need to put some extra bees into a split. Um, this is one of our crews, and sorry about the audio. We've got several crews running this time of year all over North Texas, and doing splits and getting our bees ready to produce a honey crop. Desert Creek Bulk Bees is another one of our companies. So we're one of the largest suppliers of bees in the US. So we raise and sell nooks and package bees and single story hives to beekeepers all over the country, both to commercial beekeepers that need more bees or to people that are reselling bees. So Desert Creek Bulk Bees supplies the bee supply with all the bees that we sell. So we raise them for the bee supply. And I mean, we're all the same company, but we keep it internally, it's and externally, I guess it's a little bit separated. So we raise tens of thousands of units every spring to resell to other beekeepers. We used to do it all at night, because raising when you're raising nooks, you want as many bees in the nooks as you possibly can get. And so we used to do it at night because we could get more bees to stay in the nooks. But if you've ever worked bees at night, you know it's awful because bees don't fly at night, but they crawl. And crawling bees are way worse than flying bees because if they will find a way into your bee suit at night. And so we used to start splitting at sundown and we would stop at sunup. But the crew did not enjoy it because no one likes to work all night. And then we would just get stung all night long. So we got creative and came up with some innovative methods of doing this in the daytime, so that we still kept a bunch of bees in the nooks, and a whole nother presentation for a different day. But now we do it during the day instead of during the night. Our crew's much, much happier. Some fun sights that we see. This was oops. Sometimes when you have a bunch of bees in a bee yard, you'll have what's called drift hives. So when you move a bunch of bees to a new place and nobody knows where home is, sometimes all the foragers will kind of get lost and they'll drift, and they'll cluster on a tree or they'll cluster on one nook. And so there's a nook under here, but you can't even see the nook box because it's completely covered in bees. So that happens occasionally. And what we do is we swap out that nook for one that needs more bees. So we find a nook or a hive that is short on bees and we'll put it in that location. And the one that's really full of bees will move to a new location and even out the bees a little bit. I'm going to skip through a couple of these. So the next stop on our year is Houston, Texas. We produce a lot of honey in the Southeast Texas region. And that is really exciting. So you can see they produce a lot of honey. All those boxes are full of honey. And then on the right here, you can see our crew pulling honey, harvesting honey in real time. That's how fast they move. Um, but it's one of the areas in the South that produces the most honey. And it's because of a tree called the tallow tree. And the tallow tree grows really well anywhere within about 100 miles of the Gulf Coast. And it is a phenomenal nectar producer. So it produces a tremendous amount of nectar. and it's great, great, great for honey production. So a lot of our bees move to Southeast Texas to produce a honey crop, and it usually starts in early May, and they'll be there through early June. Of course, trucks get stuck there too. So what you don't want to have happen is you don't want the sun to come up before you get the truck unstuck, because especially in areas like Southeast Texas, it's hot. And when you're moving bees across the country, you've got these nets over the trucks, and the trucks drive all day long. And that wind blowing through the net keeps the bees cool so they don't overheat. And then the truck will stop at night, and the trucker will sleep, and it's cool at night because there's no sun, and the bees stay cool. And then he starts driving at sunup the next day. And then he times his arrival at the arrival location when it's dark. What you don't want to have happen is if he's arriving, a couple hours before sunup, and then he gets stuck, and then the sun comes up, your bees can overheat and die. So this happened to us. It's happened many times, but this particular instance, he trucker got stuck a couple hours before sunup. We couldn't get him unstuck. The wrecker was still a couple hours away, and sun was getting up, the bees were getting too hot, and so we had two of our beekeepers on top of the semi, and then two of the beekeepers in the ditch beside the semi. Now the good thing for us was this ditch was full of water, and so we had buckets with ropes tied to them, and the guys on top of the truck were lowering the buckets down into the ditch. They were getting scooped full of water, pulled back up onto the semi, and dumping the water on top of the truck to keep the bees cool. And that cold water raining down on top of the bees for 2 hours kept them cool so that they didn't overheat. And then the wrecker got there, pulled the truck out, got the bees unloaded. The bees were fine. But those are the kind of efforts you have to go to keep the bees safe and healthy in these extreme situations. So, and then of course it was a beautiful day once we got the bees unloaded. There's a beautiful rainbow. You're in a high humidity area where you can have a rainbow without rain, just from the high humidity. But this bee yard is actually super cool because you can see that big chain link fence on the backside, and it's a high security fence because right on the other side, we can't really see it. It's actually kind of on the front side of this picture. There's a road, and there's an Air Force base. And and at this Air Force base, it's right outside of Houston. And this is where the United States presidents or vice presidents land Air Force One whenever they're visiting Houston. And so there's been a couple of times now where we're working this bee yard, and we've gotten to watch Air Force One land, and Secret Service lines this road right where we're working these bees, and the road's right beside it. And the Secret Service agents are always just staring at us. They never bother us. They never tell us to leave. I think they're too scared of the bees, but they just stare at us like, what are these guys doing? And then you'll see, the beast come out of Air Force One, and the president or vice president gets in the limo, and the presidential motorcade drives right past this bee yard. And so once you could see that the president just staring out the window, at us while we're working bees, going, what is going on over there? So it's a fun bee yard. It's a fun bee yard to go to. But on a great year, the hives can produce a lot of honey because there's a great nectar flow in that region, but less and less every year. I would say that our crops have gotten worse and worse over the years as the Southeast Texas region has become more and more populated, and there's less and less tallow trees, unfortunately. So, um, anyway, cool video on the right of shaking a frame of nectar to see. That's a great way to tell if your frames are ready to harvest or not. So if you can shake these frames and you get all this nectar raining out of them, means they're not ready to harvest. You should be, if you're holding a frame horizontally over the hive and shaking it, you shouldn't get more than a couple of drips out of it, and that means that it's ready to harvest. But if you're shaking it, this video is a little bit extreme, but if you're shaking it and you're wetting the top bars of the frames from shaking, it means that honey's not cured yet and it's not ready to harvest. So yeah, the picture on the left here, this is a great picture of whitening the comb. So you may have heard of, oh yeah, Robert, sorry, squirrel. In the chat here, Robert said, yeah, Ellington Field. Yes, that's I blanked out when I was going there. It's like, what is the name of that? Yes, it's Ellington Field is the one that we have. This bee yard's right next to Ellington Field in the Houston area. Um, all right, back on course. Uh, um, Picture on the left here is a great picture of what we call whitening the comb. So you'll read that in beekeeping books. You'll hear beekeepers talk about it, that when the major nectar flow begins, the bees will whiten the comb. And that's what you see here up on the lid, up on the top bars. You can kind of see this brand new white burr comb. And that's a sign that the nectar flow is really ramping up. We load up the honey. So this is loading up pallet loads of honey that we've pulled off the bees. And so the honey gets loaded onto a semi truck after we've pulled it off of the beehives, and it goes back to our extracting facility. Oops, do I have a picture? There it is. Out of order there. That's one of our extracting facilities where we spin the honey out of the honeycomb and harvest the honey. Crew is always pretty excited to leave Houston. We all love Houston, but my goodness, is it hot and humid? 90 degrees and 90% humidity, and you're pulling boxes that weigh 80 pounds full of honey off of beehives. So it's a little bit toasty. And then, of course, you got hurricanes to deal with. And so this was a really early hurricane several years ago, but it was blowing in right as we were pulling the honey off of our very last yard of bees. And we got the honey harvested, and the last truckload of bees headed out right before the hurricane hit. And so this is our crew jumping in celebration that A, we were done with Houston for the year, and B, we got the bees out before the hurricane hit. So anyway, so harvesting honey is really cool. I'm going to see if I can get the audio off on this. There we go. So we have these knives, these frames full of honey go through these knives that are shaking back and forth, and they cut those cappings off of the frames. Goes pretty fast, pretty automated, and so the wax is sliced off, and you can see here's a frame now that honey is completely exposed and ready to be slung out of the frame. And then it gets loaded into this extractor, and this extractor holds 120 frames, and it spins, and the lid closes, and it spins all the honey out of that honeycomb. And little tip, um, you want to make sure you know how to operate the controls really well. If you don't shut that lid, then you will have, I guess, about 1,000 pounds of honey slung out about 40 to 50 feet all over your building. So that's happened. So we had a new guy, and he was learning how to use the controls, and it started spinning, and he couldn't figure out how to shut the lid. And so he was just drenched head to toe, dripping in honey before he finally figured out how to get that lid shut. So, and of course, the honey just comes pouring out of the extractor, gallons and gallons at a time is pouring out as it's being extracted. So pretty cool. And of course, then the boxes that we got the honey out of go right back onto bees in North Dakota, which is the next stop for our honeybees. So while we have a crew extracting all that honey, getting out of the honeycomb, our beekeeping crew is loading up all those bees out of Texas, and they are shipping them to North Dakota. So all the boxes of honeycomb get put onto semi trucks and get shipped to North Dakota to get put on the same beehives that are now in North Dakota to make another honey crop. And if you strap down the truck properly, then all the boxes make it to North Dakota. But this truck arrived in North Dakota a little bit short. So somewhere between Texas and North Dakota, there is about 25 boxes of honeycomb on the highway. So yeah, hopefully some beekeeper found them, but we never found them. This is North Dakota. So the cool thing is that, in early to mid June in Texas, it's getting pretty hot. all the flowers are dying. It's terrible for the bees. It's really hard to keep bees healthy in Texas in the heat with very few flowers blooming. But in North Dakota, it's 70 degrees and spring is just starting in early June. So we're able to load up our beehives and move them to North Dakota. And they're able to make a whole nother honey crop, and it's healthier for the bees because, again, it's not hot and they've got fresh forage. So we make honey off of two major crops in the Dakotas. One is canola, and that's what you see here in this picture. That's where we get canola oil. It makes a beautiful, mild, light colored honey. And then the other is clover. There's a lot of wild clover up in the Dakotas. And so those are the two major crops that we produce honey on up there. Um, this is a crazy picture. Angry bees. So this is really unusual. These are really calm bees, actually. So they were perfectly calm before they went to the Dakotas, and they were perfectly calm after. But when the canola and alfalfa, there's a lot of alfalfa up there too, start blooming, the bees got so mean, unusually mean, like crazy mean. And I've got a little video here to illustrate how mean they got. So that was our crew, obviously. I'll turn the volume down a little bit. Obviously staged. They sent me this video, and I got a huge kick out of it. They staged it, of course, but the bees were pretty mean. So what was actually happening is on those flowers, when the bee lands on the flower, it slaps the bees back with pollen. The flower does, so that so that when the bee goes to another flower, it pollinates. And the bees just get really sick of getting slapped on their back all day long as they're pollinating the alfalfa and canola. And they just got really sick of it and mean. And then as soon as it stopped blooming, they were perfectly calm again. So crazy times. And of course, semis get stuck out there too. Uh, so I could probably do 100 pictures of stuck forklifts, trucks, and semis. But it happens out there too. But when the canola or the clover is blooming, absolutely beautiful, just very picturesque. That fluorescent yellow is just gorgeous. Um, Floods out there a little bit too. A few years ago, we had flood and uh, an unusual flood, and a couple of our bee yards got soaked and then a lot of the bees are okay, but some weren't. And when that happens, you pretty much just have to throw all the frames away. The boxes and lids and pallets are fine, but the frames are just, they get moldy, and it's pretty much a total loss. In early August, we're ready to harvest honey again. And so we harvest honey, and you can see there's the crew taking a little bit of a break, but you can see there's no blooms in the field behind it. But we make 80 to 100 pounds of honey per beehive out there, and harvest it. This was an awesome guy. He worked for us just for one season, but he was about 5 foot tall at the most, and he was also a gymnast. And so he would do these cool flips all over our bee operation. So I've got all these pictures of backflips of him doing cool flips. And every now and then somebody will say, "Oh, Blake, is that you?" And I'm like, I'm 6'1". There's no way I'm going to be out there doing flips in the bee yard, unfortunately. So beautiful honey. So we're extracting honey again and get this gorgeous, light, mild tasting honey. Great for creamed honey. And then that's our final harvest of the year. And then we're getting our bees ready for winter. So we put pollen patties on, treat for varroa mites, and take a lot of losses. So any dead hives, we're storing that equipment and getting the bees all ready for winter. And then by Halloween, our bees are all loaded back up on trucks, and they're sent back into sheds where they await almond pollination. So that's a year in. Oh, and then of course, never forget to have fun. And sometimes we get an early snow up in the Dakotas, and you can make some snow angels. Um, so that's a year in the commercial beekeeping side. Now, We have a lot of other things going on year round that isn't just commercial beekeeping. So we have an entire crew, multiple crews and managers and et cetera that just focus on commercial beekeeping year round. But we also package and sell honey year round as well. So this is something that I got into by accident, really. I mean, I had always packaged and sold some honey on a small scale. I did that ever since I started as a 12-year-old, to local health food stores and feed stores, et cetera. And I'd never really done it on a major scale. I mean, I got up to maybe 50,000, maybe to 50 to 100,000 pounds of honey a year, which is a lot of honey, but you can package that quantity by hand. So with a couple of big hand bottlers and some part-time employees, you can package 100,000 pounds of honey and sell it to local stores. And so that's kind of as big as I had gotten it. And then about Oh, I'm terrible at dates, but I guess probably 8 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago, we got approached by a reality TV show. It was called Billion Dollar Buyer. It was around three or four seasons long, and we were in the first season. And it's a cool premise. So it's this guy named a billionaire named Tillman Fertitta. He owns the Houston Rockets and Gold Nugget Casinos, Saltgrass Steakhouse, Landry's. He has this hospitality and restaurant chain empire. Yeah, like 500 restaurants and all these casinos. And so he did a TV show with CNBC where he would go out and he would it's kind of like Shark Tank, but he would go out, visit these entrepreneurs, get to know their operations, and then you would pitch him on, hey, we want to supply your empire with whatever product my small business is producing. So they actually called us and said, hey, we think it would be super cool to do an episode on a beekeeping company. And I was like, okay, that sounds like fun. I mean, it's a reality TV show, right? I mean, it's not going to be a real deal. We're not really going to get any business out of this. But it'd be fun, to hey, it'd be fun to be on a reality TV show. So they came out, it was like 3 days of filming. Got to meet Tillman Fertitta, super nice guy. So he came out, flew out, and put on a bee suit, took him into the bee yard, and gave him a tour of the facility. Lots of filming. I think these are some shots of them filming, and it was a great experience. It was a strange, wonderful experience. And so one of the days when we were filming, it was in the fall, and so we were done extracting honey in Texas for the year. Our bees were, for the most part, in the Dakotas, and we were done in Texas for the year. But they wanted to film extracting because it's such a cool visual, and so we recreated it. We got one pallet of honey and kind of recreated extracting so we could film it. And one step in the process of extracting honey is we have this machine that all of our wax cappings go into. So you saw those blades that are scraping and cutting the wax cappings off the frame. All those cappings fall into eventually or pumped into a machine that separates the wax from the honey because there's a lot of honey still on those cappings. And so dry beeswax falls out of this machine and then honey falls out of the other end of comes out of the other end. So it's a way that, it's a honey wax separator. Anyway, I digress. So in these barrels, it falls into a barrel. You've got this really dry beeswax, and it's got some water mixed in with it because part of the separation process, uses some water. And so you've got these barrels of this kind of dry but watery beeswax. There's no honey left in it. And then, you store it outdoors in barrels until it's ready to be processed. And it kind of ferments a little bit. It kind of gets stinky because it's kind of this watery beeswax. And so we brought this barrel back inside to recreate the show and stuck this old, kind of nasty barrel of old cappings under this machine, and it smelled terrible. So we got this bottle of Febreze, right? And so we spray down the top of this barrel of this old beeswax with Febreze so that it wouldn't smell while this billionaires touring our operation. And so we're walking around, we're on camera, and he's like, "Hey, what's this?" And we're like, "Oh, that's the beeswax," and we're explaining the process of how the machine separates the cappings from the honey. He goes, "Oh, cool." And he grabs the handful and shoves it in his mouth of this beeswax that's been sprayed with Febreze. And and he's trying to be such a good sport about it. And you can tell it tastes terrible. And he's chewing on it. He's like, "Oh, oh, oh, this is delicious." Because he doesn't want to spit it out on camera. So the camera's cut and he like runs out and spits it out, behind the extractor. And we're like, okay, we're definitely not getting this deal now. But the next day, we fly to his headquarters in Houston and make a pitch on camera of, "Hey, we want to supply your hospitality empire with honey. We want to be your honey supplier." So we do the pitch, and we get through, and the cameras go off, and it's like, "Okay, you got it. You got the whole deal. We want you to supply our whole empire with honey." And so we're like, "Are you serious?" We're at this point, we're still hand bottling, right? We're hand bottling all the honey. We don't have any automated machinery. And this was a couple 100,000 pound deal, several 100,000 pound deal with honey. And so we actually got this deal, and we had 2 months to go out and buy automatic packing lines and hire employees and actually start packing honey. And so that was kind of the start of packing honey on a much larger scale. And we said, "Hey, if we're going to do it for his empire, let's talk to Walmart. Let's talk to HEB. Let's see if we can really start selling honey at a larger scale." So that was kind of the origin story of packing and selling honey. Unrelated, I think I might have mentioned this at the last monthly Buzz webinar, but PBS actually did a TV show on us maybe a month ago. So if you're interested in seeing that, you can scan the QR code. It was a really cool overview of our businesses as well. Um, Now we make a lot of different products. I mean, we have, of course, our Texas honey, we have our Midwest honey, we do creamed honeys, we do raw honey, we do a hot honey that is going to launch really soon. We'll notify all of you guys when that's available to buy. It's in a lot of Walmarts in Texas right now. But we're going to have it available through our TBS company soon, and we'll send an e-blast out, and let you know when and where you can buy that. But we have a lot of different product lines. We sell in a lot of different grocery stores, and it's really a whole nother business. It is a whole nother business, packing and selling honey. So that goes on year round. And that has its own crews and company structure, but we're always packing and selling all the honey we produce, and then some trusted beekeeping friends, we buy their honey as well and package it. So this was my daughter several years ago now. This was my oldest daughter. This was probably five years ago now. She occasionally has to come help out in the packing room. I got to show the good, the bad, and the ugly. So this was right before the TV show, when we were still packaging everything by hand. So that was our bottler that we were using to hand bottle everything, and we were filling the honey. And this was when our crew, our we weren't selling enough honey to have people that were just packaging honey. So what we would do is we would work bees all day, and then we would come in and we would me and a few of the people I had working for me at the time that were beekeepers, we would all package honey for a couple hours at the end of the day, after working bees, and then go back and work bees the next day. And so we were often just so exhausted by the time we got back, and had to pack honey for 2 or 3 hours, sometimes at midnight. And and so this time we had turned on the valve to fill up our bottling tank. And then I think a truckload of bees showed up, and we had to go out and unload this truckload of bees. And I remember this was a guy named Brandon. And I looked at Brandon about halfway through, I think, unloading this truckload of bees. And I was like, "Hey, did you turn off that honey valve?" And he's like, "No, did you turn off that honey valve?" I was like, "No." And we're like, "Oh man." And so we run back inside. And of course, it's overflowing everywhere, and the whole floor is covered with honey. And so that's the expensive part of trying to raise bees and package honey at the same time. So Final two companies that you guys know about a little more, because usually we're talking on these webinars in the context of the bee supply. And so those are our final two companies that are under this parent Desert Creek company. But the bee supply, as you guys know, we've got several stores where we sell bee supplies. And of course, through e-commerce, our website, we sell all over the country. And so these are some shots of some of our stores. The picture on the right was our store near Austin, Texas, right as it was opening. And then of course that was actually me and my daughters a couple weeks ago visiting our store in the Houston area. And so we've got a great team that makes these stores look awesome and makes it a great experience for anybody that wants to come. We've got observation hives and learning experiences and classrooms, and so it's a lot to experience when you go to one of our stores. So just some more shots of our stores and some of the classrooms that we have. And so I love visiting our stores. I don't get to do it as often as I like, but it's always really cool to go and see everything. Of course, as you're all aware, I won't belabor this, but we sell a lot through our website. We have lots of free shipping options and wide variety of products, anything you need from this bee supplies to bees themselves. We've pretty much got you covered. If you've been with us for long, you know that we had a terrible fire a couple years ago now. This was at our headquarters near Dallas. This was one of our warehouses, and early one morning, before anybody was there, thankfully, so nobody was hurt. We had an electric forklift charger, and apparently those combust really easily, and so this electric forklift charger combusted, and this building was completely full, floor to ceiling, with boxes and frames and bee suits and smokers, pallets of smokers, as you can see there. And so it was a great kindling for a fire. It got crazy hot. There was an aluminum ladder leaning outside the building, and it melted. That's how hot it got. And so it burned for about 8 hours. And the fire department couldn't put out the fire. It was way too hot. And so it took six or eight fire departments 8 hours, and all they did was spray down all the other buildings with water to keep them from combusting. So it was quite a fire. And I have to show this picture on the right because, again, this fire got so hot that it melted aluminum. And we had pallets of unassembled boxes. So, like a 4 foot by 4 foot pallet of dense solid wood just turned to ash. That's how hot it was. So there was nothing. I mean, the concrete was burned, the beams were bent and melted in this building. Nothing survived it. You can see this picture on the right. That is wood that isn't burned. So there was one thing in this entire building that didn't burn. And it was, guess what it was? It was wooden smoker fuel pellets. The only thing that didn't burn was the one thing that's supposed to burn, which was those wooden smoker fuel pellets. And so, and we always have beekeepers complain when they're using these wooden pellets that you use for stoves and stuff. Like, we can't get these things to light and stay lit. And we're like, oh, you're just not trying hard enough. And then when this fire that was 1,500 degrees couldn't burn the wood smoker fuel pellets, so we said, okay, time to stop carrying those. You're right, they don't burn. So that was the only thing that didn't burn in the whole building. And so after that, we yeah, totally stopped carrying them. Um, we also have, of course, a ton of education through the bee supply. We work really hard to educate through classes, virtually or in person. Education is kind of the backbone of TBS. I mean, that's really what has set us apart as a bee supply company. When we opened TBS 8 or 9 years ago now, we were the only major bee supply company that did education. Like, nobody else did that. No one was giving out pamphlets that educated and doing classes and doing webinars. And now a lot of bee supply companies do it. But at the time, we were the only ones that were education focused. And so that's still a pretty core commitment of ours to educate. We don't want to just sell you stuff. We want to make sure that you know how to be a fantastic beekeeper. Couple more things I want to mention, and then I'll wrap it up. we love this. We have an inmate rehab program. So we partner with local jails, jail systems, and we put beehives on the jail property and then train the inmates how to keep bees. And so we love being a part of that program. And we help start it with some local jail and prison systems. And the inmates then learn a skill. And so when they get out of prison, they often will go to beekeeping. And then it's a great experience for them even while they're in prison, to get outdoors, work the bees, and it's been a really cool program. We also partner with Hives for Heroes. I'm on the Hives for Heroes board of directors, and then we've been partnered with them almost since they started, and that's a really cool program that part pairs veterans with other veteran beekeepers. And so it's veterans mentoring veterans, and it's phenomenal to help with PTSD and suicide prevention. And so we're a big supporter of that program. In fact, when you buy Stan's soft sugar bricks, 5% of those sales go to support Hives for Heroes. So please buy those sugar bricks. It goes to a great cause. And then we also support a lot of youth programs. And so that's how I got started in beekeeping, through a youth program. And so we support a lot of local bee clubs, youth programs, through TBS. So you're probably aware of our monthly buzz since you're listening to it right now on our YouTube channel, since many of you are probably watching this on YouTube. So we'd love to see you over there. And then the final thing I want to mention, just to wrap up, is our company called Commercial Bee Supply. This is our newest company. It's launched about 2.5, 3 years ago now. And it does the exact same thing. Whoops. It does the exact same thing TBS does, just for commercial beekeepers. So instead of selling, a box, we're selling a semi-load of boxes to other commercial beekeepers. So this is headquartered in North Dakota, and where a lot of commercial beekeepers are. And then we'll probably won't be long before we have a branch in Texas as well. And yeah, we're just focused on educating, supporting commercial beekeepers, and then selling them all the supplies that they need commercially. So this is the picture I took up there last winter. It gets cold up there. My goodness, it gets cold up there. So there's a reason we don't leave our bees in North Dakota, and those winters are brutal. So 0 degrees and sunny is a warm day, and they're all in like t-shirts when it's 0 degrees and sunny. And I'm up there with every article of clothing I own, trying to survive. But it is beautiful. The prairies are beautiful up there, and it is a lot of fun. So we manufacture a lot of stuff up there. So a lot of the supplies that you have at TBS, we manufacture. We have a lot more space up there, a lot of big warehouses and manufacturing space. And so we manufacture a lot of our woodenware, especially up there, and commercial bee supply, and ship it down to Texas to the bee supply. So if any of you are ever interested in getting into beekeeping, even as a sideliner, then we'd love to help you. CBS offers really, really great pricing and advice to help you get started on a larger scale if you want to do beekeeping as a business. We even sell things like forklifts and syrup pumps, and bulk anything you need to be a commercial beekeeper. So I always close with this slide. This was a picture of we had stacked up about 2,000 boxes to be painted outdoors. This is before we painted indoors. And right when we got them all stacked up and we were starting to paint, and it got really windy and blew all these boxes down. And it was a good illustration of how discouraging beekeeping can be sometimes. Despite our best efforts, you saw all the pictures of semis of bees stuck, blown over boxes, spilled honey. There's plenty of, dead beehives. There's a lot of discouraging moments in beekeeping. And that's true whether you have two beehives or, 30,000 like I do. It doesn't matter. When I go to a bee yard and have, 20, 30, 40% of my bees die, it's still heartbreaking. Just like it was when I lost, two hives in my backyard. And the thing to remember is we stick together as an industry, we stick together as beekeepers, and we live to fight another day. And we understand that losses are just a part of beekeeping. It's a part of the journey for all of us. And we pick up the boxes, we stack them back up, and we try again. And that's part of learning, and that's part of beekeeping, and it's a part of caring for any living thing. So don't get discouraged. Tough things happen no matter what scale you're at, and what matters is that we learn from it and we do better next time. So as you're probably all dealing with lost beehives this time of year, keep that in mind as a little bit of as an encouragement. And hopefully you'll pull together and try again next year. So hopefully that whirlwind was entertaining and interesting, and that's kind of scratching the surface. If you liked it, let us know. I can always dive more deeply into any other topics, like how we make nooks or how we package honey, or always happy to dive into that a little bit more. And I mean, usually travel and speak at, 15 to 20 different conferences in the bee world every year. And so I often dive a little more deep into specialized topics at those conferences. But what I should really do is video more of those and put them out there for you guys to see. So if you want that, let us know. But thanks for your attention. I know that was a lot of information and not a lot of time. So thanks for making it all the way to the end. If you have questions, reach out. These are the websites for all of our companies, and we'd love to help you, no matter what you need in the beekeeping world. Our goal is that no matter what you need, we're there for you, between all of our different companies, and it's our honor really to serve and give back to the industry any way we can. So with that, I will wrap it up for the evening, and I can't wait to see you in January, because for the southern half of the United States, bee season is going to get going again in January. And so we'll talk about coming through winter, what you should do to get your bees ready for spring. I'll also be streaming live from the North American Honeybee Expo. Also, I'll be in Louisville, Kentucky for that during our January monthly buzz. So we'll see. Hopefully, I have some interesting and exciting updates from that. But until then, I hope you have a wonderful Christmas, and stay warm, and don't worry about your bees too much. They're going to cluster. They're going to be fine. Just make sure they have plenty of food. And I'll see you in January. So have a great Christmas, everybody.